That was the worst showing under Coach Dan Quinn for the Commanders. Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always appreciate when you tune in, especially after games like this. And by the way, level up with the new AAA Commanders MVP membership. Get all the benefits of AAA plus exclusive experiences, discounts, and tickets. Already a AAA member, upgrade for free or join today at AAA.com/Commanders. So let's get, oh, by the way, and don't forget AAA sponsors this podcast. So let's get to the game because that was ugly, folks. And I want to get to the injuries right away because those are very important and it impacts the rest of the season. We do not know yet what Austin Ekeler's status is as I record this. Same with Dietrich Wise. Listen, folks, let's put two and two together. Austin Ekeler has an Achilles injury. He was carted off. He was seen leaving the locker room with a walking boot on using crutches. It does not look good for him at all, sad to say for him. And he looked certainly very glum in the locker room. And the way players talked about him is about what they were going to miss with him. Obviously, I think we can understand what's going to happen, what will be confirmed on Friday. We got to wait till Friday to get the official news. I don't know yet when we'll get that news. Dan Quinn is not scheduled to speak to us again until Monday. But I'll just say, suffice to say, like Ekeler and Dietrich Wise will be getting more tests done on Friday. At some point Friday, the news will likely come out. And Wise, of course, left with the quad injury. Again, no update on his status. I think, again, you can start to put two and two together here, and both of those would be big losses, and I'll talk about that in a minute. You also had John Bates and Noah Brown both left the game with groin injuries. So I did see Bates walking around in the locker room. He looked okay, but I don't know what his status is. That is what we'll get updated on Monday from Dan Quinn as well. So let's get to the game because, like I said, that was the worst showing under Dan Quinn. And listen, man, like these Thursday night games can be hit or miss for teams, and I'm not a huge fan of them. And so you don't want to overreact to certain things, right? You don't want to overreact to what was not a good loss, this 27-18 loss to the Packers. You have to always maintain perspective, right? It's just that you would like to have seen a much better showing out of them tonight. And listen, there was very little that went right here. The coverage units were really good, and Deebo Samuel had a really nice return. Other than that, there was never really a time where either side of the ball looked like they were really in control because the Packers offense did mostly what it wanted to and could have scored a lot more, and Washington's offense couldn't really get anything going until late. And they actually were kind of in the game late. They were only down by a score. But did you really have confidence that they would get a stop to get the ball back with the chance to tie the game? I did not, because the Packers did what they wanted to. And I think that was the troubling thing. And again, they did what they wanted to on offense and on defense. And that's why, like last week against the Giants, the offense they only scored 21 points, but the team looked good overall. Like they gained 432 yards. They completely do what they should on defense and shut down a bad offense. But they did do a pretty good job moving the ball against a very good defense. They had penalties last week, so it kind of stymied some things. This week, they didn't have penalties. They didn't have turnovers. That was the troubling thing, is they just got dominated. And that's what was eye-opening to me. And we'll get into all of that. Against the Eagles in the championship game, like they got blown out. That was a massive blowout. But you could look back and say, well, those turnovers completely changed the game, right? And Eagles the way it unfolded, the Eagles were just clearly the better team, but the turnovers were a major issue. Again, no turnovers tonight. That wasn't the issue. The issue was you just got beaten down. And that is where, and again, it was a 9-point game. It's a little bit deceiving because it never felt like, even when they were only down a score, again, it didn't feel that close. This was the fewest yards they'd gained on offense since Jaden Daniels took over as quarterback last year. They really didn't get any rhythm going, and we'll get to that in a minute with he and Terry McLaurin. They have a revamped offensive line that felt like would take time to get going this season, and I've talked about that because they just haven't spent that much time together. You have a backup right guard and a rookie right tackle. That is a tough combination to have, and it showed tonight, and it showed a little bit last week too. They were just able to overcome it. The difference is, like, Jaden Daniels could not get out of the pocket. Like, that is a very fast defense. So when he would break contain, he really didn't have a chance, and it was hard to break contain or to move up in the pocket without a lot of other bodies there or just speed closing in on him. And so like but that right side line just wasn't good enough. I mean, the line wasn't good enough. But the right side line, that was a problem. And Josh Connolly struggled again in pass protection. And Nick Allegretti, like that was a weakness of his last year. So it flared up in this game, and that against a very, very good front. Don't minimize what, like, the Packers have a really good defense. That is a very good team. And, I once they got Micah Parsons, you kind of had to put him as a prime Super Bowl contender out of the NFC. And I think they were very good beforehand, and then adding him to that mix and what else they can do up front makes them dangerous as hell. So that's not to make excuses for these guys, because you can listen, these guys want to view themselves the same way. So if that's the case, you got to play better than what you did tonight. You got to show better than what you did tonight. Defensively, they have press corners, but the coverage, they had issues in coverage, and they got beat in that press coverage. And sometimes it was a matter of just Green Bay had really good press man beaters. And I felt like that's something with this team, like they would take shots and look for big plays if they got man coverage. And Matt LaFleur is a very, very good coach. A lot of things they did that I'll get into, that worked well. It's funny because I talked the other day, but there are a couple of things. One, I'm an idiot because I actually thought these guys would win. Just because for a variety of reasons, I felt like there are some things that I felt like they could do, that they were capable of doing, that could offset some of what Green Bay's defense does. Well, I was just wrong. And, now maybe if they play them later in the year, maybe you get that. Maybe they're in a better spot offensively because they just don't have any rhythm. And so it's hard to go, one thing you knew this going in, like one thing, but there are things that they still do well here, and I think they will do well, but they're not there yet. And so you have to wonder the impact of McLaurin and Noah Brown missing basically all of training camp, that time together. Like, McLaurin was talking about after the game. I talked to him, and he's, last year as he said, they took a couple games to get going with he and Jaden Daniels. But he was there in camp, and you saw the rhythm in camp. Like, you saw the chemistry in camp. He wasn't there in camp this year. Now you saw the chemistry last year. I'm sure, like, I don't think it'll take long to get it back. And the funny thing is, he has more receiving yards after 2 games this year than he did last year. He had 39 receiving yards after 2 games last year. 39. So, but one little difference, and for ESPN, we use that QBR, the quarterback rating stat. Well, it's out of 100. Last year, when he would target McLaurin, it was 89.6. This year, it's 48.8. Completion percentage, like, it's around like 54%. Last year was 67% to McLaurin. So they're not cooking up, and we see that. And I'll get into a little bit as to why I think what Green Bay was doing defensively, that I think certainly didn't help, and a lot of it was up front. I think you saw the game. One thing, talking to Bobby Wagner after the game, is he pointed out this is why it's good to have veterans on the team, like Zach Ertz and all that. They've been through all this. They've had games where they're just like, that was just horrible. And so you take it, you put it away. But as he said, you don't want to panic. Certainly not after 2 games. I think this team is smart enough to know that. Like, fans can go out and panic, you can do this, and we can all panic, whatever. They can't. And I don't think they will. Like, they lost 3 in a row last year and then won a bunch of games in a row. So this is one loss. It is a bad loss. It was a primetime loss. It was a loss against a very good team where I didn't, and I told you, I didn't think this was necessarily a measuring stick game to see, are they good or not? I think there was a measuring stick game to see, how good can you be? Well, we see that they have areas that they still have to improve. And they've got, like, last year, that you could make some big plays and maybe some things would get overlooked. Well, they're not getting overlooked right now, or certainly not after tonight, because you weren't making those big plays. So that's why it's a little not concerning, but it certainly was not what you wanted to see. And again, they have a game against the Raiders in 10 days. You go home, you do that, you're 2-1 after 3 games. That's not too bad. So, again, last week against the Giants, they did what they should. They moved the ball. They just didn't score. They had the penalties. This year, tonight, no penalties, no turnovers, and they just had no momentum. The Giants game, I came away encouraged a little bit by that game, in that they didn't play their best game, and they still were in position to score 30 points, still in position to get probably 500 yards. Tonight, they had 230 yards. They weren't in position to even get 300 yards. That's what it is. And again, I think you have to credit Green Bay quite a bit. That is a really, really good defense and well coached. Jeff Hafley is a terrific defensive coordinator. The offense is terrific with Matt LaFleur. Jordan Love has hit a stride, but I think it really, they use a lot of guys and he targets a lot of players. Green Bay is very good. But I felt Washington was equipped to do this. I felt like against that defense, like you watched them against Detroit last week, they dominated the Lions too. The Lions, would you still view them as a team that could do pretty well this season? Well, after one, why would you not think that have just one game? They're still a very good team. So the same thing here. Um, but I felt like Washington was equipped to do some things for a couple of reasons. I felt like, they like to run no huddle. They like to run tempo. I felt like that could regulate Green Bay's defense because they like to do a lot of disguising, but it didn't matter. And I felt like, with the run game, they caused a lot of hesitation and confusion sometimes. It didn't matter. And they didn't do a lot of that. And I think part of that, as far as the run game, I think part of that is because that's such a fast defense. If they're just going to crash hard, it could lead to some big negative plays. The more I thought, when I watched them tonight, because I didn't see any of that, it's like, well, that's would be the reason. That would make sense as to why, because those linebackers are flying downhill. If you try to cause too much hesitation, but it takes too long to develop, they're going to be in on you. And I think that's a sign like they didn't think they could hold them off quite enough to do some of that. But the no huddle, the spread, I felt like that could help. And the quick game, they couldn't get the quick game going. I think so I was just wrong on that. So don't like to be wrong, but that's why they play it, and it's why I don't gamble on this stuff. But I did think they had some answers there, and they just did not. The speed was a big difference. And I'll tell you what, the speed was a big difference between when you watch their defense and you watch Washington's defense, that speed really jumped out, especially their speed at linebacker. That was just, it's really, really impressive. And so much gets played off of that. Like you watch their corners aren't that great. The secondary, you heard Rob Domofsky on the podcast that I had. He's our Packers reporter for ESPN talking about like that would be a weakness. However, if you have that front, that weakness is mitigated, right? And so you watch them, they played some soft zone early. And the problem is like there were times where guys might look or might be open or think they're open, but Jaden Daniels got a hand in his face or he's got pocket collapsing or whatever. So like it was as one player said, it would be like a blind throw. So you really couldn't get there, right? And then as the game wore on, corners started squatting on some of these routes. Like you would see, this tight coverage because they know the ball's coming out quick and they know the pressure is going to get there because it had been all game. So the corners just start squatting on these routes and it takes away that. And it means that you're not getting the ball down the field either because there's not time to do it. And there's just no rhythm whatsoever in part because of that. And so that was a big issue tonight to me. And I think like they've got to get this passing game going. And this goes back to how the whole summer, last year, again, they do a lot of walkthroughs. But some of these practices, I just felt like the whole camp as a whole wasn't as strenuous. But again, it wasn't strenuous last year. And they did start slow and they certainly recovered and they certainly hit a stride. So see where it goes from here. One thing I know is they still have Jaden Daniels. I still think he's very good. And I still like what they have on offense. Is with McLaurin, with Deebo Samuel. Losing Eckler is going to be a very, very tough loss because of what he does. Like, yeah, they have Krosky Merritt, they have McNichols and Rodriguez, but that's when a group that was very deep now is not as deep because you lose your best guy at that position. He was very valuable to them. Like he's a guy who is a big time worker, and that's one of the things that every player talked about that. And he's a leader in that room. Like you lose that leader. And Krosky Merritt can't be that guy. He's a rookie, right? But can he go out there and provide maybe a little bit of energy on offense? Sure, but he can't provide what Eckler did because he's their third down guy. That's picking up the blitz. It's knowing how to run certain routes and against various leverages and all that. Like I told you before one time, like I'm watching him in practice and he's out there going through during a special teams portion where he's over on the side and he's got all the garbage cans lined up, running his ball, the some plays just as if he's running the ball, like and cutting there, but also as if he's going out on routes. And then he'd sit there and talk to himself, like, okay, if it's this leverage, I got to do this. If it's this leverage, you do this. So he would practice against what he perceived in his head as with, a different leverage. So he would visualize this guy in front of him with inside leverage, who's going to react this way, outside leverage, they react this way, head up, going to react this way. Like that kind of stuff is why he's lasted this long. So you lose that, and what you hope is that that stuff rubs off on the other players, and they do that. But he's still further ahead, so you're going to have to replace that somehow. And can you do it? Sure. Like he shouldn't destroy the season on offense because again, you still have Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels still makes guys around him better. He just needs time to throw the ball, right? And he did not get it tonight. He was pressured on 46% of his dropbacks tonight. That's the most in his career that he's been pressured. And it was coming from all over, but Connolly had an issue, right? And there was he's getting beat inside, he's getting beat outside. Um, I told you he improved throughout camp, but what you're seeing now is how he looked early in training camp. He did not look like this later in training camp. Now, maybe one thing I didn't particularly like about this camp is they don't have a lot of one-on-one. So you're not, you'll get one-on-ones in you get the matchups in full teamwork, but those one-on-ones can be very, very helpful for a young guy because the more you see the pass rushers, the better off you are. Other coaches I've seen did a lot more one-on-ones. These guys do a lot more situational stuff. And they were very good at it last year. But you have to wonder for a guy like with Connolly, like you really need to learn more about some guys like that. And I do wonder, would they have been better off like alternating he and Wiley like they did Coleman and Lucas last year? But the bottom line is they didn't. They're not. And listen, all this is not on one guy. Like there are other issues going on with the offense, and a lot of it to me it gets back to pass game. You got to get time, but you got to get that rhythm down with Daniels and McLaurin especially. And I think once you do that, this offense will be better off. But they've got to get that going. Um, I think that's a big deal. And so but Connolly's he's gonna go through growing pains. And like I said, I still think he's going to be a good player. He's got good traits. He's very young. I think that play strength has to grow and develop. It could take him another year for him to get to that point with the play strength. His technique can improve. Like some of that is just technique. So that's something I want to be watching when I go back and rewatch the game, is those struggles. But it's got to improve because he's going to face good pass rushers. But I do think that they just faced two of the better fronts they're going to face this year. And, so I think that's going to help them down the road, right? But those two groups are very, very good up front. And so now they can move on. So um, but again, I like him long term. The other thing is like with Micah Parsons, now you don't have to face him again unless these guys make the playoffs. But I also thought with Green Bay, what they did tonight, I thought they would put Micah Parsons on Connolly all game. Well, they didn't. There was a lot of times he's on the right side. Well, you kind of like, why is that? Well, my theory is that they want to make sure that Daniels gets pushed to the right. Like they know that's where his tendency is. So if you can push him to the right, if he can force him to the right, now you got Gary coming on the left side because they figure he's going to be Connolly. So you're going to flush him into a sack or into a pressure. That to me, and I don't know that for sure, but that kind of makes sense. Like they know that's where he likes to escape to the right. So that was a way to keep him going that way. Because last week against the Lions, Parsons was on the left end about 80% of the time. Tonight, it was definitely seemed to be a definite split, and they would put him over there on occasion, but definitely was on the right side and making sure that Daniels would not escape that way or would get pushed to where they think, and then you got that guy coming. So, anyways, on offense, Green Bay just moved it. It was too easy, folks. They had a lot. They are really good. That's a well-coached offense. And Matt LaFleur is a very good offensive coach and had been a very good head coach. But they had some really good man beaters. And you see it early. Like they did a lot of motion. The motion and the play action really, to me, hurt this defense. And the one area I was surprised by is like, I think this is a smart defense. And I talked about this the other day. And I still think that. They did not look like that tonight because there were some guys open in coverages, the tight ends. Some missed tackles. That's not smart. That's just a misplay. But the missed coverages or the blown coverages, and I would say more missed than maybe blown, but some of those man beaters too hurt because they send a guy in motion. Like for example, there was a speed out. They had a guy in motion, and it's against Lattimore, and he runs a speed out to the right in a third down situation in the first drive. Well, it's hard for Lattimore to get over there behind the defense to go cover him on a quick out in that situation. So sometimes, like I think it was a function of that. That's a well coached offense. One time, for example, there was Sandler still gets beat by a tight end. I think in another late down situation inside the 30-yard line, but the tight end goes in motion, it goes in from motion left to right. And I think, let me see who that was, but he goes in motion left to right. And yeah, it was Musgrave. And he goes in from motion left to right, gets to the end of the line on the right, just off the right tackle. Well, Samuel Still's on the outside of him, so he's got outside leverage against him. And then Musgrave goes back in motion to the other side. Sandwich's got to cut through traffic to get over there. Well, it's a quick, easy out, and it's a first down. Like that, they did that a number of times. So you're putting the defensive backs in stress by doing that, but you're going in motion, thinking he's getting set. Now he's going back in motion the other way and doing a speed out, and that's going to be tough to cover. So like little things like that were happening, but they also attacked on the field, which I told you they would do that because that's what they like to do against man coverage. Saw that for sure. Love will attack, and they did. And that's, and this team got hurt because of it. I don't know how you lose Tucker Kraft, but they lost, a couple times. They weren't aware of him, or you're playing too far off in a certain coverage, or, you have on the one long one, Wagner's not going to be great in coverage. Like that's just not his strength anymore. And he's deep in coverage. And it seemed like I don't know if he lost him and what happened. But you also have the safety cheating the other way, because Musgrave is taking Will Harris on a deep crosser. So he's going with that, and that just leaves Kraft wide open. And something that just can't happen. It just can't happen. So that was another issue tonight for sure. And folks, that was just bad. There was just a lot of bad plays by them, but I think Green Bay right now is just simply a better team, and that showed. It doesn't mean these guys are somehow going to the tank. You can't go there. They're 1-1. It's one game in the NFL. Last year against Tampa Bay, they didn't look great. And then they looked okay against the Giants and they won. And then they got on a roll. So see where it goes. But I was surprised at what they showed tonight. Just couldn't get that run game going either. But I think some of that was just that defensive speed. And then you start to fall behind. You got no rhythm. You can't convert first downs. So you're not able to get anything going at all. And that makes it very hard. So, yeah, I don't know, folks, but I want to talk about leadership in a minute. But first, I got to tell you, Commander fans, this is for you. Level up with the brand new AAA Commanders MVP membership. You'll receive all the benefits of AAA, such as 24/7 roadside assistance, plus chances to win game tickets, access to exclusive team events and experiences, along with 15% off Commanders gear at the online pro shop. Already a AAA member, add the Commanders MVP membership for free. Head to AAA.com/Commanders to upgrade or join the squad and put your fandom in drive. So tough time to talk about fandom after a loss like that. But again, there's 15 games left. So settle down, take a deep breath, get ready for the Raiders, get to 2-1, go, right? But I will say, like, the loss of leadership for Wise and Eckler is big. And we don't know about Bates. Will he miss time? He's their best blocking tight end, as even Zach Ertz said, like, hey, he's got to block better now if Bates has to miss time. We don't know anything about that yet. Noah Brown, that would be a loss because, although tonight he wasn't able to get any of those contested catches, but he does do that well. And so, but I don't know what it is, but we know with Brown that he has durability issues. So, they did try to sign Kedrick Bourne. He ended up going to San Francisco. They did try to sign him. They did make him an offer. He went to the 49ers. He played there before. So clearly there's a familiarity there. But we'll see what they do there. Again, we don't know anything yet, so I don't want to go anywhere. But I do know that one thing they've been very good at is building this roster with a lot of veteran leaders, and that's Eckler, and that's Wise. Like Wise was already establishing himself that way for sure. Just like it's not always just like again, how you the rah-rah or getting in guys' face. It's the professionalism. It's the coming in and doing your job. As Brandon Coleman said, those guys were always there taking care of their business. When people see that and you see veterans doing that, then you start to incorporate, oh, that's how it's done. So the more guys you have like that, the better off you are. And you start losing them, others have to step up. On the line, if Wise has to miss a lot of time or maybe all the time, we don't know yet. But if he has to, you have Javonte Jean-Baptiste going to have to do it better. He's going to have to play more, right? Yvonne Miller played a little bit more. You have Jalen Holmes on the practice squad. You also have Cleveland Farrell is still out there, I believe. So, you have some options, but Wise was a guy that they were excited about because of his strength and setting the edge and playing that big defensive front that they like to use. He was good in that. So, I think there are a couple other things tonight too. And I know like I'm not getting to a lot of game stuff because I think this is more of a bigger picture thing, but I did not like the sequence at the end of the half. Did not like them kicking the field goal because Matt Gay now is 4 for 12 in his last 12. He's made 4 of his last 12 kicks from 50 or more yards going back to last year. Now 1 for 3. And he did not look good in that area this preseason either. And Dan Quinn, I asked Dan Quinn, he said they got to the line where they were comfortable kicking. Last year they were aggressive going for it. And I asked him about that. And he's like, is that a game situation thing? He said, yes. Now they were getting the ball back to start the half and they wanted to bleed the clock to not give the Packers a chance to do anything with it. Well, it turns out they did. They just missed a field goal, but they also could have done a better job handling that clock management at the end of the half for sure. And I think, again, I wasn't crazy about them. I did not like them kicking that field goal. And it wasn't, I said this before he kicked it, so I'm not second guessing. Now, if he makes it, you say, okay, well, then I was wrong. This isn't second guessing. This is what I thought at the time, just because that Matt Gay has been struggling from that distance. And he made one already. Good for him. That was good. But he's been struggling from that distance, and now it was even further. So that was a tough one. And it would have been helpful. And even Matt Gay said, like, he missed 2 field goals. Like, hey, you get those points, and now maybe it's a different game. And so, like, there are ways, if you want to build on some stuff, like, that's a really good team they played. There is definite room for improvement. I think Deebo Samuel, when he was able to get the ball, was able to help. He just needs to get the ball a little bit more. And I'd be curious to see now what Krosky Merritt does. He's going to get more reps. Chris Rodriguez will get more time. But who's going to fill that third down role for Eckler? That's going to be the problem. So, just a couple more things here, folks. But let's see. Again, coverage was pretty good. I don't know that you're going to take a lot off that. I did think, again, I thought Green Bay's play action passes and play action game hurt these guys. And the motion and the play action really hurt them. They didn't play man all game. They definitely played some zone, but when they played man, Green Bay was ready with their man beaters. And I know, like, covering that staff back in the day, the McVays, the Shanahans, the Fullers, they loved when teams played man coverage. They felt like if you're playing man coverage, we're going to beat you and we're going to move the ball. And that's what we saw tonight. Now, you had to was the matchup with Lattimore and Amos and Samerstill against that receiver group a good one? On paper, I think so, but it didn't turn out that way. And it wasn't just their fault. Like, there are linebacker coverage issues as well. So, not the best night for them, but again, that's how does Lattimore, 2 holding penalties. Not a good night for that group, but I think there's some things again that Green Bay does well. So we'll see, folks. Where do they go from here? This team handles adversity well, but the injury adversity is going to be a little bit more than what they faced last year. John Allen was the only one who really went out for any length of time. So it's going to be a little bit different this year with that, and to have it to have this stuff start happening in week 2 is tough. But this is why you build depth. And I think the defensive line has depth. They like their depth at running back. Well, now it's tested. You lost your best guy there. Now you're really going to be tested. How do you respond? I think one thing this team has been good at is responding to adversity and being resilient. That's going to be tested now. Anyways, folks, that's it from Green Bay. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll be back on Monday with another episode, kind of taking a second look at this game, some second thoughts from what I see. So I appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.